In this world, many cultures and civilizations have emerged and faded away, but some remain eternal and made a mark in history. One of them is the Egyptian civilization. Maybe because of its unique elements like mummies and pyramids, this Egyptian civilization was well recognized all over the world and remembered for years. During the Egyptian era, along with the pyramids, there was one more interesting practice, and that is mummification. Mummification is a process of turning dead bodies into mummies. This is really a very interesting practice. Surprisingly, these mummies have remained intact and did not spoil or decomposed for thousands of years. So what exactly are these mummies and why were people turned into mummies after death? In this video, let's explore the Egyptians' belief about the life after death, how is mummification process done, and how the journey of the soul that is separated from a body would be. Welcome to the Underrated channel. When any living being dies, the body usually decomposes naturally. When we are alive and whenever the old cells die off, then the new cells will constantly replace itself. But after death, new cells no longer replace the old ones, and at the same time, enzymes in our body begin to decompose all the cells in our body. So to preserve a body, these enzymes must first be removed. Preventing a dead body from decomposition is very difficult. Yet, in ancient Egypt, they discovered a method to preserve dead bodies which is known as mummification. The reason behind mummification was Egyptians' belief that death was only a temporary state. They thought that after death, a person's soul would transition to another life. And for that journey, the soul would need its body. They believed that the soul would eventually return to the same body to eat and drink, so they took measures to preserve the body. They believed that if the body was destroyed, the soul would also be lost. And so, they preserved the body through mummification. Now let's see how mummies were created. First, they removed all internal organs to eliminate the enzymes responsible for body decomposition. They started with the brain because it's one of the first parts to decay after death. After a person dies, the brain cells collapse and release water. To remove the brain, they made a small hole in the nose with a thin tool. Then inserted a hook-like instrument to break the brain into pieces. The soft brain pieces then converts to almost water-like structure, which is then pulled out through the nose. Once the brain was removed, they filled the empty skull with tree resins or oils to prevent further decomposition. And interestingly, the Egyptians did not consider the brain as an important organ. That's why they didn't consider it essential to preserve. Next, they removed the liver, stomach, intestines, and other digestive organs because they contain digestive enzymes and bacteria that would start consuming the body after death. Along with this, they also removed the lungs. But they left the heart inside the body. The Egyptians believed that heart was responsible for emotions, intelligence, and feelings, so they took great care in handling it. The removed organs were stored in jars called canopic jars, with each jar dedicated to a specific god responsible for protecting that organ. These jars were eventually placed in the grave along with the dead body. After all these organs were removed, the entire body was covered in natron, a type of salt. But before this, the body is first cleaned properly. Natron not only kills bacteria but also deactivates the enzymes. And then through a process called osmosis, the salt draws out water from the body. The body is kept covered in this salt about 40 days, allowing all the water to be drawn out, causing the body to dry and shrink. After 40 days, dehydration causes the body to lose up to 70% of its weight. After this, they rub the body with fragrant oils and resin extracted from the plants. This treatment with oils and resin makes the cloth stick well to the body when it is wrapped. They then wrap the body in several layers of linen cloth, often using hundreds of feet of fabric. Special proactive amulets were placed within the wrappings and spells were also chanted. If the dead person was a king, the hands were wrapped across over the chest, and if the dead person was a normal person, then the hands were left straight. Finally, the body was placed in a coffin-like box called sarcophagus, which was then sealed. Additionally, a painted face of the owner was placed on the outer surface and the name of the dead body was written near the feet. The entire mummification process takes around 72 days to complete. These mummies were either buried underground or placed inside pyramids. The walls of the graveyard were painted with the images and text that shows the journey after death, detailing challenges, punishments, and showing the details of life after death. The Egyptians believed that the soul separated from the body would read these instructions and start its journey after death accordingly. That's why they placed various items on the grave such as tools, jewelry, furniture, clothing, food and weapons, believing these would be needed in the afterlife. They even mummified the pets like dogs and other beloved animals and placed them in the grave. Finally, the grave was sealed with walls to prevent anyone from entering, making it a permanent resting place. The mummification process varied based on the status and wealth of the dead person. For kings like pharaohs, the process was elaborated with sarcophagi made of gold. Wealthy individuals received sarcophagi crafted with stone. And for ordinary people, the sarcophagus was made of simple wood and the mummification was of lower quality. The only reason they put so much of efforts, money and time to create mummies is their belief that life continues after death. The Egyptians believed strongly in life after death. They believed that the soul continues to live on. Surprisingly, back in those days, Egyptians had a book known as the Book of Death. This book described the journey of the soul after death. It contains the details of what the soul will experience, the challenges it will face, and how the soul can reborn. They believe that the soul have to face difficulties and challenges, like lakes of fire and magical gates, all guarded by some fearful beasts, snakes, and crocodiles, and half-human monsters named He Who Dances in Blood. And luckily, the soul reads the guidelines in Book of the Dead. This book helps the soul in crossing hurdles like crocodiles, snakes, and many poisonous animals in the journey. And soon at the end of the journey, the soul will reach the goddess called Math, that belongs to the truth and honesty. And after crossing all these challenges, the soul now have to prove it had lived a good life and made no mistakes. This test was conducted in front of 42 judges and the soul had to pass a hard test and have to prove it did not make any mistakes when he is alive. This is one of the key beliefs and the soul have to pass this hard test. In this test, the heart was weighed against an ostrich feather, symbolizing the truth and justice. If the heart was heavier, it indicates the soul had committed crimes and would be punished by a creature called Amit, which is a mixture of like a crocodile, cheetah, and a hippopotamus. And if the heart was lighter than the feather, it means the soul had lived a truthful life. Hence, the soul will get all the blessings from the next life. Once upon a time, mummification was only reserved for royal people and royal families, but eventually ordinary people also began to be mummified. Over time, Egypt's mummification process became very popular and many mummies have been studied. With the help of latest technology, we are able to digitally unwrap the mummies without spoiling it, to understand the lifestyles and diseases of ancient Egyptians. We are also able to postmortem those mummies and collect the DNA samples from mummies, and able to identify the cause of death and date of death. However, mummification was not just limited to Egypt. Right now, if we hear about mummies, we will remember Egypt. But in fact, other ancient civilizations such as Chichora, a tribe of South Africa, practiced mummification as well 2000 years before Egypt's civilization. However, the process in Egypt is the most famous and perhaps the most effective. But in the recent times, one of the most well-known mummies in modern history is Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Russian Revolution. After his death in 1924, Lenin's body was preserved using modern techniques, including the removal of internal organs and the application of secret chemicals to prevent decomposition. It is almost 100 years Lenin died, but his body is not yet spoiled. This Lenin's mummy is displayed in Moscow, and a dedicated team named Lenin Labs works every year to maintain it, using specialized chemicals and controlled lights and maintaining proper room temperature to preserve it for future generations to see. Friends, suppose if I ask you to rotate in clockwise direction, you can. And if I ask you to rotate in anti-clockwise direction, you can rotate. But what if I ask you to rotate in both the directions at a time? You can't rotate, right? But surprisingly, the electrons in an atom can rotate in both the directions at a time. Quantum physics is one of the most difficult subjects in science. But if you pay attention, it is one of the most interesting subjects as well. So I promise you, I will explain quantum physics in such an interesting way. So in the next video, we shall learn quantum physics. Alright friends, if you like this video, then please like, share and subscribe to the Underrated channel.